I've applied all the textures to my scene inside of Sketchfab, and I'm really pleased with how all of these textures are reproducing the illusion that we initially created in both Substance Painter and Blender. And I'm ready to start applying all the post-processing effects to really finalize the scene and get it all set for publishing. So there's a couple of things in here that I want to do, and the first thing that I want to accomplish is the background. Right now, it's set to ambient environment. I'm in the global scene settings, and with ambient environment, it's using the hues and the color information of the background image to light our scene, which is pretty cool. But I'm not feeling this kind of gray, and I want to see some color information back there to help me kind of round out the illusion that my little turtle is in the middle of a forest. And we can do that easily just by turning off this ambient environment checkpoint. And now that gray is gone, and we're actually seeing the image. It's super blurred out, and the 3 value here is the default. If we had it at 0, then we're actually going to see the image itself. Now, with that at 0, it's pretty easy to see that we are on the beach in San Francisco, which is not exactly the illusion that I want to present to my audience. So I'm going to put the value back up to 3, or maybe even 2, somewhere right around in there. I like to kind of gives the illusion that we're in a forest, and that's a pretty good place to start. So I'm liking this background. That's working out pretty well. And the final thing to look at are all of our post-processing filters. And these are global filters that are going to affect every single object inside the scene itself. And there's some really good ones in here, like screen space reflections. This is going to start establishing small little reflections within the objects. In addition, screen space ambient occlusion. And this is the one that I really like, because now we're getting some deep shadows right where all these objects are contacting each other inside of all the parts and pieces in the scene itself, which is pretty cool. In addition, I'm also going to put a little depth of field in here. If we look at the depth of field options, there's some important ones to note. Of course, we can super blur the foreground like this. Okay. If this is the kind of first shot we're looking at, we can start to influence, there we go, influence the foreground and the background individually. We don't have a lot of background geometry in here, so I'll put these values back to where it was, which is 0.5. And I'm going to increase foreground blur just a little bit. A little bit goes a long way. Don't go like super crazy with it. We're just trying to suggest the smallest inclination of depth of field, and that's pretty good. Okay, sharpness is another one that you may want to experiment with. It's going to make all of your all the textures a little bit more contrasty. If we turn it on, it's subtle, but it feels like the images just kind of punch out a little bit more. So with it off, that's what it looks like. With it on, it looks a little bit more crisp. It's up to you and the textures that you're working with to determine how you want your sharpness to look, but that's something that to experiment with as well. Chromatic aberrations is another really good one. This is a photographic effect, and with it at its default values, we're getting this really cool fringing and kind of these echoing of colors around the boundaries of our object. Now, at this level, this is probably not what we're after, right? When you can check it out here on the edges of my log, you can see the impact of the chromatic aberration. When you're taking a picture with a real camera, you're going to get small little chromatic aberrations, these discoloring of the edges that are produced by the lens itself. So a small amount can actually give us the smallest suggestion of a photographic look. So small little amounts in there go a long way. Now for me personally, I always like to have a little bit of vignette. A vignette is going to start to make the edges of our scene a little bit darker. This is another photographic effect that kind of makes our images look more like a photograph than a 3D render. Bloom is something you'll want to experiment. Now, I get real cautious with bloom because it can become kind of an overwhelming feature and soften the entire scene pretty fast. There are some sliders in here that we can adjust to kind of localize the blooming effect. This is really impactful when you have emissive or volumetric properties inside your scene. For my little turtle, I'm going to leave it off. I don't think it's adding too much. Now, tone mapping and color balance, these are two options that will allow you to continue to adjust the global colors, the hue, saturation, contrast, brightness of all the different materials and the final render inside the scene itself. This takes a lot of tweaking, but you can go in and start to tone map things. And I think this filmic look is pretty good. If you just turn it on and off, it kind of puts all of the colors inside of a curve, a color curve. It's not a linear reproduction of color anymore. It's using a curve to define the shadows and the highlights, or the bright spots and the dark spots. And I like the filmic look. I'm just going to leave this on by default. I'm not going to go in and adjust too many of the properties because I think that's looking pretty good. Same with color balance. You can adjust the hues of all the pixels that are being rendered in the scene itself. So I'm thinking this is pretty great. Now, if you'd like, there are some other features that you can do. You can create those small little annotations in here that will call out certain functions and features of your model that are pretty neat. We don't have any animations in this particular model file, but if you did, this is where you can control all your animation clips. And of course, we're not going to be working in AR and VR in this particular project file, but there are some really great features in here that will help you configure your scene. So if you were looking at this scene in a VR headset or on an augmented reality device like an iPad or a tablet of some kind, you can make some really great adjustments to it here as well. Okay, let's go back into my scene settings, and now I think we are pretty much done. The last thing that we want to do is create a scene or a view, and this is going to be the thumbnail image of the project file in Sketchfab. So you can compose a cool little shot here to use as your view. Like, see, if you hover over it, you get this cool rule of thirds grid, which is kind of neat. I want to have my thumbnail be a little bit closer, somewhere right around in here. Yeah, I'm liking that. Get a little bit closer, have it at a cool angle, get a nice view. Perfect. Let's save the view. And now this is going to be the view that both is saved as the thumbnail and is going to be the view when we first start the project file itself. It's currently saving it. You'll see we'll be able to publish this here in a minute once all of these internal properties have been saved. I haven't saved this project file since I started uploading all the materials, and you can see that it is in fact taking a long time. The final step is going to be to publish this project file and embed it inside of Sketchfab or send the link over into Canvas. We'll do that after we're done saving our settings here in a minute.